and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa Life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The spa in Spa Life, the SPA, is seek power always. That power within you so that you can step out and do your work in the world. I am so thrilled to have our special guest, a friend, and I'm a fan of Andrea J. She has coached draconian bosses, angry spouses, and the emotionally stuck for 18 years. She is the CEO of Thought Partners International, the founder of Power of Coaching Live, and is doing research, which I find fascinating, into emotional leadership and the abuse of power. Andrea J., welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a fan of the show and you, of course. So it's delightful to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. You know, you have so many superpowers, and one of the things that I love about you is the innovative of ideas. I've seen you on stages. I've looked at some of your videos, and we'll be talking about one that is really kind of up and in the world right now. But you really help people find that footing and to really, emerge out into the world. And whether they're, looking to, see revenues, 6, 7, 8-figure revenues, one of the things that you are really passionate about is helping shift the culture. And I'm curious, has this been something that has been with you all along? Is this something that you're stepping more into now? I know that, you seem to always be ahead of the curve. I mean, you were back in coaching when people didn't really know about it, Thomas Leonard and Coachville. You always seem to be ahead of that wave. Why is that?
I think because I really let my heart lead.
Beautiful.
I care deeply about our world, and so we don't like to focus on the negative. Obviously, power can be derived from negative sources of energy as well as positive. But right. For me, my personality, Diane, I can't sit quietly when things are not okay with, the friends and whether they be colleagues like you or like the animals on our planet or, whatever it is, I have my heart won't let me rest and in the face of that.
Right.
So it causes me to think creatively, be curious and not be afraid of the pain that's in the world. That's a lot of what drives the innovation.
That's such an important point about not being afraid of the pain, because I think we've all seen people that stops them, the fear, or that might be too hard, or I don't know how to do that. I mean, all those type of things. But the fact that you embrace that and step through that is such an important, unique quality about yourself. And what would you say is like new and important about coaching? Like what is happening? What are we stepping into these days?
From my perspective, coaching is in an identity crisis. It used to be really unique that you could do this thing called coaching. But now the entire self-help section of the bookstore is a coaching section. Oprah magazine is a coaching magazine, really. And so because this wonderful thing called coaching has at once become diluted, like it's everywhere. We all take a coaching approach to parenting now, or, if we've read an article about parenting in Oprah magazine, we are. We're all coaches now. We really are. And so there is a moment in time right now that we get to pick what the purpose of coaching will evolve into. And for me, in a very short sentence, that's to help solve the problems in our society, social problems like violence in our world. You know a bit about that, right, Diane, with your background?
Yes.
Yeah. A coaching approach can help, whether it be everyday violence on college campuses or violence in relationships, like in domestic disputes. Imagine if we could infuse coaching, the next identity of coaching, with the understanding that it has the power to create more safety, more peace, more harmony in our world.
So how are you shifting the way you are doing coaching, or how you're coaching coaches to step into this new opportunity?
I think the first thing is that we have to change awareness. So that's part of changing culture. You can't shift something if you're not aware of it. At least I haven't figured out how to do that. I don't know about you, Diane. But so awareness among the coaching world, whether it be for coaches or managers who are doing coaching, whatever it is, I think we've honestly sold ourselves short. We think coaching is a thing that we build a business around, and how do we raise our fees, and what are our programs, and what are our offers, and those are all important things. But there is so much more power in what we can do. So that's why I love that. Seek power always. You know, we are so much more powerful than we think. And that's the first awareness that I've been working on within the coaching world.
Right. So let's marry those two together, of the coaching world and seeking power always. You know, how is it as coaches, when they're used to a certain way, how can they actually, you know, seek that power within themselves to really emerge and make an impact in this? I mean, so many times I think people feel like that's too big for me. That's for other people to do. You know, how can they embrace their part of the pie?
Yeah, it's such a, like a totally on point question. I think briefly, two things. One is, first of all, you might as well embrace it because it's already there. So if you're not embracing it, you're kind of misusing a resource that you have. Like right now, right here, listening to this or watching this, you have so much power. And you're kind of just like an air conditioner out in the middle of the street trying to heat the whole block if you're not using it consciously. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the second thing about this power is really I think a very simple exercise is to remember the moments when you felt most alive in your work with coaching. So maybe it's an employee that you've been working with, maybe it's a joint venture partner, right, Diane? Or maybe it's a coaching client where truthfully you change the entire world, the trajectory of their life. Anyone who's been doing coaching in some shape or form has moments like that. Really dropping into those moments and understanding how profoundly you created change for that person.
Yes.
That will remind you of your power.
I'm sitting with that because it's like, you know, I think sometimes we forget that there is a collaborative effort to coaching about how you show up. There's an impact in how that person receives it, how they can, you know, see you in a certain way, and it can have that deeper lasting impact that you may not even be aware of, and maybe even not even, you know in that call, the ripple effect of what happens with that. And I think it's so powerful the way that you're standing into your own vulnerability as well. And this is something that I'm really stepping into myself. You know, I just sharing more about, you know, my law enforcement background, and whether that was in patrol or undercover, you know, there were parts of that I didn't always feel comfortable sharing. And, you know, because there were times I needed to stand into that power, but there were times I felt disempowered. And especially, you know, as a single mom, I had a lot of things going in my head of, you know, taking care of my children, but then taking care of my community, and just the different hats that we wear in the world and what that looks like. And that's why I was so taken by your video that you have out there about when the police came, and just, you know, there's no surprise that there are over 2 million views with this video, because it's really impacting people of looking at themselves and taking that personal responsibility of shifts and changes that we can make within ourselves. And I found it so powerful for you to really talk about your how you grew up, how anger was a part of that, and how, you know, you recognize it. Talk about having awareness of how it was having impact in your life, in your relationship, and how you consciously chose to do things differently. If you could speak into what motivated, you know, that video, how is it that you were really able to make those shifts and changes?
Sure. Yeah. So the video that you're talking about, I know it's so yummy now to be able to really talk about it so pointedly. So thank you for bringing it up. Not every host, you know, is that commitment to the real talk, to bring that particular video up. So very briefly, that video was, it's just a 2-minute video, and it talks about when, in my marriage, we were having such a hard time with emotional abuse and really mental anguish that I was perpetrating on my husband. So I was being the bleep hole, and the police came to the door. And they looked at my husband as if he had been beating me, because that's the stereotype, right? That would have been what they would expect, probably very rightly so. But it was me. It was me that was incredibly angry and unleashed and unhinged. And what I realized in that moment was, I had become something I had learned from my childhood environment, which was a very emotionally abusive and domestically violent environment, and that I had caught like a cold, like cholera, like any infectious kind of human disease. I had caught the virus of violence, and I was behaving like my dad towards my husband. But in the intervening years, that was now, a long time ago now, several decades, I was able to find that power within me, right? I saw it and was able to grab hold of that power within me. How did I do that? I was able to feel the pain that I was inflicting on my husband. I was able to be vulnerable enough, allow myself to be sensitive, sort of take away the fear and the protection that was preventing me from feeling how much pain I was putting him in, right? And then from that place of holy bleep, I need to do better. I can do better. I choose and I decide that I am better than this, and I determined to change. And then those concrete steps of how to change, behavior change, neuroscience, psychotherapy, all of those tools that all of us have,
right?
Conflict management, those were just steps to getting to where I am today, where, we're still married. We're about to celebrate 25 years. We're happier now than ever. So I'm living proof, right, Diane, that
Yes.
It's really not about me personally, but what's meaningful about it is there is proof, there's data in at least one story that you can suffer emotional abuse, perpetrate emotional abuse, and then stop the cycle and find peace.
Right. Well, I love your courage in stepping into this, because these are the exact kind of things that people don't really want to share about themselves, right? There's this part where we look at that, you're professional and you're established, and we think that would maybe in some ways tarnish how people would think about us, but it really is the opposite, because when people realize that you're a real person and that you are making choices. And so for anybody of our listeners, you may be in this place. It could be you, it could be your spouse, somebody I mean, I believe we all have known someone, whether they've shared it with us or not, that are struggling with something along these lines. And that it really comes down to that decision that you may not know how to change it, but you're deciding you want to. And maybe that's the time where you reach out to somebody, anybody else, to have that conversation and to really get outside of ourself, right? Sometimes they say about, the brain that gets there is not necessarily the brain that gets us out of there. And so to really start, seeking out some of those resources and having those things happen. And, watching things like this really has, and there's a couple of my peer friends that I've connected with that I feel like have given me permission to share some of the things that have happened in my life that I don't want to share. And, I won't go into a lot of detail with it. However, I was in a relationship while I was on the police department that was not a healthy relationship. And I had a lot of, shame and guilt and should have known better, and was out helping other people, but didn't feel like I could help myself in those situations. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really speaking more about that as well, is because when we have those awarenesses, it's only then that we can make those shifts and those changes. And even though those are things that happened many years ago, they do have lasting imprints when we don't make those changes, and how we can step deeper into the world and make those cultural, that classic of, change happens with us first. Sometimes we don't look at those things in our day-to-day, that we just kind of moving through the motions and don't realize that those huge shifts, which start with a small shift, can really make that big difference that we're here to make in the world. And I'm seeing this as maybe the nuance about the identity crisis that you're talking within that, how the coaches and the people in the world are looking at themselves and their impact. Do you feel that there are some incongruencies that are happening with people that they are trying to see how they can match that up to really be more authentic in the world?
I think so. I mean, first of all, Diane, I need to really deeply thank you for being willing not only to have this conversation, but to step out yourself as you continue to model seeking power. That this story of vulnerability, of the things that we find difficult to talk about, really is the next place for finding our power. And you are helping to shift culture in a way that is my heart just gets so big about it. So, when we normalize every single time, every single little comment that any one of us makes, we normalize it for the rest of us. And I mean, it's been said that, in the United States, that almost 2 out of 4 people has experienced. So this is not, oh goodness, it's a secret that it impacts a few of us. It's impacting every one of us. Every time in the news we see somebody misbehaving violently, there was a dad and a mom, a sister, a brother, a community. Do you think any of those people who, if we can have them be more vulnerable, like we're suggesting in this conversation, could have impacted that violent person? Absolutely, that's where it begins. So as far as the coaching space, it's, I think of coaching as a community of humans. So exactly what I just said is every single coach who's willing to trust their heart a little more and spend as much time on the content of their message, the content of the story they stand for, the content of their self, their capital L self, allowing the essence of them to be what's leading them in their client work, as much time on that as they're spending on branding and logos and titles and offers. And there's nothing wrong with that, Diane. There really isn't. But I think that in our own growing up from a toddler into an adolescent into an adult industry, a mature industry, this is a moment in time when we're shifting from taking care of our individual needs, our own bank accounts, our own client rosters, to saying, what, together we can shift culture. We are the ones that have already shifted culture. We have the proof that we can do it. Let's keep going. Let's pick other issues. Let's talk about race and gender. Let's talk about political corruption. Let's talk about the environment. Coaching has the power within, if we seek it, to achieve that change.
Wow, this is so important to have this conversation. And, it's, I love that this is not new to you, right? You have been so powerful in conversations. In fact, I had to laugh when you were talking here because I had grabbed your book from my bookshelf about We Need to Talk. And this was originally around, guiding, challenging conversations in business. But actually one of my favorite things about this book is actually the bookmark, because in the back here, you talk about, things to say in conversation. And when I was looking at this last night, I was looking at one of the things here is, could I pause for a moment, right? So some of the things in here about calling out what's happening in the room and having some of these type of conversations, this is a great tool for personally and also in coaching and not just so strictly in with the business part of it. So, this is such a great tool and I love it. And there's times where I will, because I've got things that are marked and turned and I'm just like, oh, you know what? This applies to so many different layers, right? And just like things can look at in one way, when we look at them a little bit deeper, it's just starting that conversation, right? And maybe fumbling through it at first and not knowing exactly what you're going to say. And that's okay. It's just starting that conversation of, have you thought about this? Or are you feeling this? Or, what do you think about this? Even being okay about having an opinion. I think sometimes, we get to the point now where we, with political environments and all the different things happening, we don't want to personally say how we feel because we think we're going to be judged for that. And I think that it's important to have a conversation. Is like, based on my understanding for myself right now in this space, which could change, this is how I'm feeling. This is how it's impacting me. This is what I'd like to do different about it. What does that look like? And we only do that through the collaboration of conversations.
Yes. So well put. Yes. And I mean, if I piggyback on that, I think another lovely thing, which you do really well too, is like sometimes people can say, oh, I don't want to say anything because I'm fearful for whatever reason. Am I being racist, or am I being judgmental, or am I going to get trolled, or whatever it is? Here's a hot, useful tip that anyone can use immediately. When in doubt, say something that creates an opening for you to listen.
Please say that again, because I know some of our listeners are driving and they missed that.
Yeah. Say something. So you're thinking, maybe I should say something. Maybe you're at dinner and a relative is being a blowhard of some kind. Okay. And you're like, I have a heart for creating change. What do I do in this situation? And you modeled, Diane, a beautiful example just there. In that situation, you don't have to have an opinion. All you need to do is say, I'm really curious. What do you mean by X? And like pick one word that they said. Take one word out of whatever they were spouting off on. Okay, maybe they said a terrible word and you're like offended and you're like, I can't believe you used that word. You don't necessarily have to pick that word, okay, like a racial epithet or whatever it is.
Sure.
But you could say, so you said you saw a woman doing something. Could you say more about that? Okay, so that's what I mean by say something that creates an opening for you to listen more. Now, there's more that can be said about, you want to try and pick something that's a little like, it's sort of low intensity if you can. Don't pick like the most intense word unless you're really ready for it, right? But, and you can learn how to be ready for that too, but pick a low intensity word. Like the other day I was talking to a woman about politics. She said, it's really irritating about this political person did this and I can't believe it. And whatever the political person is, doesn't matter.
Right.
But, she works in election security. So she said that it's infuriating to her that the machines at election time are not more secure. So in that moment, I'm like, if I'm going to walk my talk, right, I'm going to try and foster a conversation. Right. So I said, I'm really curious about these machines. Tell me more about these machines. When she's telling me about the machines, I can pick another word out of what she's saying and say, so say more about that particular thing. And this is how you have a conversation by fostering listening.
Right.
Not only you are listening, but she's listening or he's listening to what he or she is saying more. And you're creating shared conversation that can lead to change.
Yeah, I love that. What that reminded me of is, Chris Voss, the famed, FBI negotiator, really talks about that, it's important for somebody to be heard. And that is usually the difference of what happens, whether or not someone releases a hostage or is willing to talk, is that they don't even necessarily care if you agree with them or not. It's that they felt heard. And that is such an important underlying thing, is that, of course, we all have different vantage points. We grew up differently. There's different experiences that we have. We may not have all the information. There's all the nuances of why there's differing opinions and why, no one's is more important than the other. But that whole sense of being heard is such an important thing, I think, that we sometimes forget when we're either trying to push our agenda or we're trying to, say more and not listen. But that's so important for you to bring that up, Andrea, about the, people feeling heard, because so much can be diffused and people can feel so like even almost letting go of why they were even in the tizzy about something, because they actually felt that they mattered.
Right.
Yeah.
You got it. The spaciousness of that the
Right.
pause of that. I'm sure, you have talked elsewhere about that. My favorite way of remembering this, did you notice ever that two ears together form the shape of a heart?
Oh.
Aw.
Of course you realize that.
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean, and it's just like yeah, right? Like
yeah.
two ears. And that's what, we have one mouth and two ears. We have two ears that form the shape of the heart. When in doubt, when you're seeking power in a conversation, whether it be for yourself or for the conversation on behalf of the conversation, seek openings for listening.
Oh, I love that so much. And, you in talking your talk, you have really created a platform for this. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your Power of Coaching Live, where you've got some Q&As, and tell a little bit about that and what people can gain from that.
Yeah, there's really one thing that I love the most, and that is great conversation like this one. And so everything that I create now has to do with increasing the spaciousness, the safety, and the robustness for great conversation. So, I mean, I do private one-on-one coaching, I lead workshops, I have courses, but the event that I'm leading here in the next couple of months, called Power of Coaching Live, I'm calling it a wisdom potluck.
I love that.
So what do I mean by that? I mean, like, everybody brings their wisdom, and the way we've designed the event is that we will share, each person will get to share a little or a lot, so nobody needs to feel intimidated. We'll have formats to be able to do so, whether it's in writing or talking or standing up and sharing. But we'll be facilitating the actual conversations about some of the tougher topics. Emotional leadership is one of them. How do you be emotionally resilient as a leader in your tribe, in your community? How do you innovate your income streams? Mm-hmm. Like, what if the income streams just start freaking busted and they're not working? Can we have like a really great wisdom potluck about that? Well, that's what we're doing at Power of Coaching Live. And then we'll be talking about some of those difficult topics, like how gender identity, racial bias, mental health. Those are all conversations that I think that as humans and as people who understand the power of coaching, if we can have bigger conversations, deeper conversations where we practice being vulnerable, we're going to be much more powerful in our work.
Yeah.
So that's what Power of Coaching Live is.
Right.
You all are invited, by the way. Diane,
Yay.
Oh my God. Your voice would be so amazing to have at the event.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah. So let's put that information in the show notes, and so that people can get a hold of that and be part of that. And, one of the things I always like to ask too is, around environments, right? You and I have a passion from the environments that we create. And I was so intrigued because you wrote something about ideas environment. Talk a little bit about that.
That saying, I think it's Dale Carnegie, you become most like the 5 people you hang around with. Mm-hmm. Well, I like to apply that to ideas. So your mind and what it's thinking is very likely in this very moment, as you're driving or whatever it is, the thoughts you're thinking are most influenced by the last 5 things you read. Mm-hmm. Did you read like 5 cat memes this morning? Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right. Yes.
But consciously curating your idea environment. So if you're trying to provoke your thinking, like I am in research about, how to create behavior that changes and lasts, right?
Right. Yes.
In a lasting way. So I'm surrounding myself with all the journal articles from the latest neuroscience, so that my idea environment is up-leveled. My brain can be shaped by that.
I love that. I was just thinking about this morning. So I'm listening to 21 Days of Energetic Success with Rhonda Renee. So, and that's just like 1-2 moments. So it's like and she had said something, a quote around that success is 90% energetic and 10% effort. And just what are some of those things that are just setting into the mindset. And then Carrie and I are also listening to John Assaraf, about, financial path of thinking, right? And so all the different, nuances of that positivity, and really just, that was one of our commitments, again, this year, is not only to be reading something, but also to be listening to things that just start off our day, because it sparks the conversation. It's the different parts that start interweaving together, and that melding of the minds. It's like if we're each doing that up levels the conversations that we're having. In fact, one of the commitments that I had made after I had retired from the police department, one of my last cases was a kidnapping murder case. And there were a lot of things that happened in the media. And I had decided that I was no longer going to listen to mainstream media. It didn't increase the value of my day. And I'd get frustrated when I knew a lot of it wasn't correct. And there was just so many things around that. And I said, you know what, there's something important I need to know in the world. That person will come connect with me, or something will happen. I don't need to watch, a loop of that type of energy in the world. And so these are some of those things that people don't necessarily remember, that our environment affects us in so many ways, and can have those kind of lasting impacts.
Yeah. Would you continue to stand in the smoking zone if you're a smoker? Totally don't judge. I don't judge you. I have been there. But would you, if you're trying to get away from that, stand in the smoking zone, would you go live outside a garbage incineration plant? Would you bathe yourself in potato chips if you're trying to up-level your diet? No. So your ideal environment is the same thing. Exactly. I love I'm going to need to follow up on some of this. Rhonda Renee's thing is really, really great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really awesome. And so, and speaking of environments, one of the things I love to ask my guests, because we have a different experience in our bedroom versus our kitchen and our office and all these different, environments that we've created around us. What is your favorite room in your home, and why?
Oh my gosh, it has to be my office, like right where I am right now. I love our home so much. We live in a tiny island, and it's all just forest surrounding us. There's only 900 people where I live, so that gives you sort of a sense. But within that, my office, it's a sanctuary. It has a lot of spaciousness. I have 2 desks. I'm so spoiled and lucky, because thinking and ideas, creativity, curiosity really is my milieu. It's where I swim. It's my value to the world. Yes. So just the colorfulness of, you can see sticky notes, you can see my sunrise painting. It's very zen and yet colorful and creative. And I love spending time here so much.
Right. Oh, I love that so much. And this is so important for our listeners to listen to, because a lot of feedback I get from people is their office is their least favorite space because of it being cluttered. It's a dark room. It's things that, and it's really a reflection of areas that they're being stuck. And, especially how in alignment you are with, ideas and expansion and the lightness. I mean, it's such a reflection, this space that you've created. And so it's a beautiful example for our listeners who may be listening to this versus actually seeing it, about how bright this space is and how it's a reflection of what Andrea stands for in the world. And so it's so important to look at our environments and have that be a reflection to really, if we aren't quite there yet, have that environment pull us into the experience that we want to have. And you can do that by changing just one thing. So thank you.
Yes, that's the thing. Do just one little thing each day. It's like seeking that 1%, as we seek power always, just 1%, half a percent, 0.01%. Like that's all.
Exactly.
Really. Keep the faith. Yeah.
So good. Well, Andrea, I know that our listeners are going to want to stay connected with you. How can they do that?
In keeping with the idea that I love deeper conversations, if you've been stimulated by this, I do a conversation open house style, complimentary each month. I call it a community coaching call, and it's free to register. So you could just go to my site, andreajlee.com/ask. And ask is ASK because it's really it symbolizes we're all there to ask how we can be better and do better in the world. And there's a whole lot of listening that goes on, but also some teaching and coaching and Q&A on business topics, life topics, leadership topics. We'd love to see you join.
Oh, wonderful. That's a beautiful gift to, create and talk about an environment where, that can be that forum to start having some of those conversations. So that's going to be wonderful. So definitely we'll put that into the show notes for people to connect with you and also be part of the community. So thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and for being here on the show.
It's been delightful. Time passed so quickly. And Diane, I just really want to thank you again for all you do in our world to make it the more beautiful place we know is possible. It's so heartwarming to know you're there. It's just like, go. Let's keep going. Let's stick together and keep going. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you so much. It's my honor. And, we will put all these links here into the show notes. And I'll also have on there, listeners, the link for my, the liferesetquiz.com. That's liferesetquiz.com. And that's, again, it's all about awareness, what is working in your space, what's not working in your space. And, that's, the mind space as well as your physical and your self-care, really looking at all of those things and to have that awareness. And I do not take it lightly that the most important resource that we all have is our time. And so appreciate you all taking this time to be here with us. And, really the learning happens with what you're going to change. What is it that you're going to do differently? What are you going to add to your life? What are you going to take away? And we would both love for you to put into the comments, whatever form you are listening to this on, is to put in the comments and to tag both Andrea and I if you've got questions, how we can support you. What is it that you are making that shift and that change in your life? How are you standing in your power to really shift and change that experience for yourself? And, we do this as a village. We do this as a community. So please, subscribe, please share, have yourself and your friends be part of the conversation. If you're not sure how to start it, this format is a way to do that. Share this message from Andrea, from myself, to get it out there in the world. And that's how we make the world a better place, is do that one thing with the both of us and all of us, and together is such a big part of that one thing that you can do today. So I want to thank you all for joining us and for being here. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now.